Welcome to the Sober Nation FM podcast, where we're putting recovery on the map. I'm your host, Jonathan Sylvester. This show is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Do you want to take your recovery to the next level? Do you want more support, community, and fellowship? Sobriety Engine is an incredible community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. You can get a ton of great tips, resources, and guidance to help you succeed in recovery and in life. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. Sober Nation FM is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle, all while supporting your sobriety, then you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave a review. Nation, let's hop right into today's episode. Today, I'll be speaking with recovery coach, certified interventionist, and co-host of the Overcoming Adversity podcast, Amanda Marino. Thanks for coming on the show, Amanda.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. And I want to hear more about your recovery coaching and definitely the podcast. But first, I'd really like to just jump right in and ask a little bit about your own story. So what was going on before you actually got sober?
Well, I had been introduced to recovery very young. I was 14 when I first was introduced to it. My aunt was in recovery in and out, and my dad was a recovering alcoholic.
Okay.
So I was first introduced to the rooms, to 12-step fellowships around 14. And then I was in and out, of institutions, detentions, juvenile detention centers, and rehabs until I was 26.
Wow. Okay. And so where did the addiction itself actually start, and what did that look like?
Well, it's funny because we can look at people's lives and say, oh, well, this person had this great childhood and this great life, and then this person had this horrific one, and we all ended up in the same place. But I think that it's just how we're somewhat built. But I had a lot of childhood trauma. My sister was kidnapped in front of me when I was 7.
Wow.
Brought to Canada, and the guy tried to take me too. It was actually her father. He hired somebody to do the actual kidnapping, and he was like the driver. And he was also my sexual abuser and, physically assaulted my mother and I. So when I saw him, I was like flagging this car down after the kidnapping, and I thought it was going to be somebody that would help me, and it was him, and it was like, oh shit, and they ended up taking her out of the country. Wow. So I believe that I didn't trust adults. I had been abused. I had been, went through all of those things as a child, that right away I started reaching for things outside of myself to make myself feel better.
Okay. And so was that like drinking at first, and just like, to what extent was it going on? Was it just dabbling a little bit, or were you like me where it was just kind of full force?
Well, it started, I mean, as we look back at our story, things appear, but my first addiction was definitely shoplifting. Taking something at like 8 years old and getting away with it was like
that was me.
Yeah.
That was me. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Stealing like candy and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. And not a lot of people get that,
Yeah.
like, not that my mom couldn't get it from me or whatever, but I liked getting away with it, and I liked getting caught.
Wow.
Because I got attention,
Yeah.
and so I was good with both. So then I first tried marijuana at 9.
Okay.
And then I have to be quiet. I have a teenager in the other room.
Don't tell them about the marijuana.
He knows, but he doesn't need to know all that.
Yeah.
So then I was, basically the 8th grade summer, going into high school, I found all the bad boys, all the drug dealers, all the bad boys, and then that just was gone after that. Just really found my place of getting outside myself constantly, and it was kind of a garbage can as far as substances, really.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Man, I learned a lot doing this podcast, and I've definitely thought about like the shoplifting and the stealing stuff, when I was younger, before the drugs and alcohol or any of that even started. But I'm making a little more of a connection there in terms of how it relates to, my substance abuse and just my story. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Well, because it takes us out. It's the same kind of, it's like I got a rush from it. I got a high, and I got a high if I got away with it, and I got a high if I got caught. So like either way, it was a win-win for me,
Yeah.
It was a full addiction.
Wow. And you also got into modeling and acting at a pretty young age too, right?
Yeah, so I was 4 when I was like in my first runway show, and then
Oh,
I did
wow.
a lot of print ads and commercials, as a young girl. And then as I got older, started to dance in hip hop videos. I danced in the Ricky Martin She Bangs video.
Oh, wow.
I danced for Kid Rock, Britney Spears. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well,
And when I
and
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
sorry. When I was younger, the industry was very clean cut. Like I always had to have somebody over 18 with me for any photo shoot or anything like that. But in that industry, they prey upon you when you're about to turn 18. And that's when they try to, get you to do things that, are inappropriate that we hear about nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, with the whole Me Too movement and
Yeah.
everything else going on. Yeah. And so where do you think all of that fits into just trauma, the relationship to it, your addiction and substance abuse? Like where does all that fit in?
Well, I was labeled as a pretty girl, and that for me made me feel good, and it was who I was, and I identified with that, and it made me not have to think about um, all the things I had been through. It helped fill a hole for me. It was another thing that filled a hole. If I had that kind of attention, and whether it was positive or negative as I shifted older, it was part of who I was. And I really had a hard time when I got clean and sober, knowing that I wasn't going to go back to that ever. And that was like really hard for me to think of all the dreams that I had really destroyed. Like I started going to auditions completely out of it, and up from the night before, embarrassing myself in front of famous people. And that was really, like a lot of shame and guilt,
Mhm.
and thinking of all this was my dream my whole life. But then guess what? So many better things have happened in my life that have so much more depth and meaning today.
Yeah. Well, and I certainly want to hear more about that because like I've said many times on the show, we try to put a lot of focus on the solution and the good stuff going on after the substances and everything else we go through on our journey. So I do want to know though. So I mean, you're basically describing a lot of stuff going on in your childhood, starting the substance abuse, relatively young. These lost dreams, as you described it, kind of figuring out that hey, this might not be the path that I actually end up taking. This thing I've wanted to do for so long, which is driving a lot of guilt and shame and other stuff. Where does this lead in terms of a whatever you want to call it, rock bottom, defining moment that starts to make this shift into sobriety? And like how bad do things actually have to end up getting before you decide to make some kind of change?
Ooh, well, that's a lot. There's a lot in that. Well, like I was somebody that when I was doing good, I was like really good at sports. I was really good at everything I did. I put my heart in. So I've always been a very passionate person. But when I got into drugs and alcohol, like I also was that way. I really like it, did it well. And it went from a party scene, fun girl, party girl, to alone at my house, with a 18-month-old child, couldn't stop taking pills and doing cocaine and drinking all night, and not able to function as a mom. So, and I woke up and I was in treatment, and I had been in a few times, and I was like, what the hell happened to me? First of all, I was 200 pounds. I didn't know how I got from that to that, and forgot like 10 years. I had like a whole blackout.
Wow.
And of course, things have come to me. But I had, when I found my aunt dead, I found her passed away in her bed to the disease. I
Mm,
had about 3 months sober. My son was born. I was trying to get sober. When I found her passed away in her bed, I could see her through the window. She didn't answer her phone. She was blue. Um, I got worse before I got better, and then I used money she left me to go to rehab.
wow.
Yeah. So I was calling. This was Yellow Pages days when you found treatment centers in Yellow Pages,
Hmm.
not online. And so I was googling, looking through Yellow Pages, and I found a place down the street for me, and I could still see my son and have him involved in the care. So that was really important to me. But when I went there, I still was an asshole. Like I was for the first month, I was still like that client, like punched a guy, mooned a staff member, was causing a ruckus, smuggled in energy drinks, ran away down the road, cursing out my therapist. Like I was a
Hmm.
disaster. And one day the owner just sat me down, and that was my first spiritual awakening. Well, I had a few, but this was the first one of clarity. He sat me down and he was like, Amanda, what the hell are you doing? Like, you are here, you have nowhere to go. You've been in and out of treatment centers for over 10 years. Like, whatever I thought he was a complete jerk,
Sure.
but whatever he said to me, it was like the message I needed to hear. And I have goosebumps. Like, that day forward, I swear I just started to do one little suggestion at a time that people said, because I wasn't sold on it. I had to try it. I believed it could work for you, but it started to get better.
Wow, that's awesome. And I'm guessing maybe occasionally, just as payback, you get a few of those clients these days.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Times 10.
That's funny. So, and I love that what you just described, is a spiritual awakening or spiritual experience, one of them that you had. And it was this moment of someone being direct with you. And I've heard that so many times. And I think that's such an important part in this whole deal, is like figuring out a way to have those people around you, right, that are going to be direct and just like tell you the shit you need to hear, right? And so many of the defining moments in my life and in my recovery were moments like that, where someone, maybe I didn't like the person very much, but they said something that I really needed to hear, and I needed to hear it right then. And
Yeah.
and I could tell that they were telling me because they actually cared. And if they didn't care, maybe they wouldn't have said anything.
Right. It's about the message sometimes, not the messenger. And then I found the man like 10 years later and thanked him. And before he
Oh,
actually
wow.
passed away from cancer. So
Wow.
I thanked him for saving my life, because it was like that divine intervention that was like shook me. And I'm like, what the
Mm,
hell am I doing? What am I
yeah.
doing? Like,
Wow. That's cool. You got to
yeah.
thank him though. So
Yeah. It was cool. It
I
was cool.
I know that you credit your son with kind of saving you from addiction, so to speak. What do you mean by that? How so?
Well, sometimes we're so detached from everything, like in ourselves, that we don't really initially want to do it for ourselves. But once we're there, we have to continue to do it for ourselves. So, the guilt and shame I had from the kind of mother I was for the first 18 months of his life, leaving him in soiled diapers, not having that emotional mom son connection with him, because I had resentments that it was taking me away from my party. I wasn't ready. I wanted him, but I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to be a mom. I didn't know how to be a woman by myself. So um, it was really hard to look at myself and to think of the kind of mom I was, and I really couldn't take it anymore. And so he was my prime motivator, and he always listen. They say kids pick up on things. Like, if you're depressed, your kid usually is behavioral. My son was like an angel. He was happy all the
Mm.
time. He was Mr. Happy Baby, we called him. And he just was like a bright light, and he just was my inspiration. And then as I went to treatment, he was coming and visiting me. And then as I got out and I was a single mom with him, and he went with me half the time and his dad half the time, I learned what love was. I fell in love with him. And the first time ever in my life, like good, like real depth, clean, that love, like he taught me what it is. So he truly saved my life.
Wow, that's really cool. And I've also got to rewind and say the fact that you had a moment of clarity or whatever, maybe you got some guidance on this from someone, but to take the money that you inherited from your aunt to use it for treatment, I mean, thank God, because I probably would have done something a lot different with that money at the time.
Yeah. Well, it was not in my hands, because I don't know that I would have either.
Okay.
It was in my mom's hands, but
Okay, good.
it was definitely divine intervention. It was the best way I could honor her.
Mm, yeah, I like that. I like that. Now, I want to ask, a lot of what you do is interventions, right?
Hmm.
And most of what I know about interventions personally is just what I've seen on TV, the show Intervention, hearing little bits and pieces, from other people in recovery that have experienced intervention. So I'd really like to hear a little bit more from a professional about this. What do you think are some of the main, maybe misconceptions about what interventions are?
Well, often families we speak to think that we're like coming in like gangbusters and gonna like grab their loved one and make them come with us. And like, I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They don't think it's an act of love. They think it's us coming in there and like, beating people up and dragging people out by their hair. And it's quite the opposite. It's a very, very loving event, you know?
Okay. Yeah. Well,
So that's a
well,
big misconception.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And so I guess that leads me to my next question. Like, what is really the root purpose of an intervention? Is it really to get someone to seek treatment? Is it just an opportunity for loved ones to express themselves? Is it what is really the main thing that you're after when doing an intervention?
So there's a multitude of things. So first, when a family reaches out, and we do like a first caller screening. So we document that. We have like a form that we fill out just to get a bunch of information. One thing we let the family members know is that we want to help their loved one, but we're going to help them too. And so we want people to work with us that are going to do work themselves, because listen, we know it's a family disease, and that not only the person that's addicted is affected, everyone else is affected, whether it's how the family system functions, or how things, traumas in the home, or whatever has gone on, that everyone has to do work. So we let people know that, right away. The style that we do often is, so we have a registered psychiatric nurse who does all of our screenings. So speaks to each family member, each person identified, and just gets a bunch of background information, family history. Let's see if it goes through, like, does it go back generations? Like, what are we looking at? What's the prime thing? Is there childhood trauma? Is there trauma in life? Is there eating disorder? What we just want to get as much information as we can.
Mm,
And
wow.
then yeah, and then we work with the family to help them find the best kind of spot. We give them a few options, let them choose based upon finances, resources. And then there's two models. We either invite them, let them know they're coming to some kind of thing, like we've been called patient advocates, we've been called all kinds of different terms.
Okay.
And we have a sit down meeting. We do the pre-intervention, like the pre-game kind of thing, before the day before, to run through, and then the day of we do the actual family meeting. In situations where we're scared the person will run because of their history,
Hmm.
then sometimes we do the surprise model, where they walk in and like the show intervention, they walk in
Yeah.
and everyone's sitting there.
Okay. I'm just thinking, like, there's just a lot of moving parts in something like this,
Yeah.
and I guess I was thinking about maybe even your story a little bit, where and what you were describing, just some of the events in your childhood where it was someone kind of close to you that was part of the problem, so to speak, to put it simply. I guess I'm just thinking, like, how do you try to deal with this whole family like you said, it's a family disease, right? So maybe there's people that are really part of the problem more so. I mean, do you sometimes ask people, like, not to be part of the intervention, or like, how do you? I'm just this just seems like there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, no, definitely. Recently we did one where we asked the mom not to come, of her
Okay.
son, because it was just not a help. It's because it's not about, it is, of course, it is important for the families to get out their things and have their letters and have that kind of thing. But it's really about somebody that's in a life or death situation, that cannot see clearly, and like trying to get them to have a moment, like to give them an opportunity to get the substances removed. Maybe they go just to say yes to their family, or whatever their reason is that day, because we're interrupting the cycle of addiction. But if they get there and then they get clean and they get properly medicated if they need it, then they have the opportunity to really get better for themselves, kind of like I did. Maybe my motivation at first was my son, but it ended up being for me, as I was able to be like, oh God, what did I do? What happened? Because they
Yeah.
don't realize what they're doing.
Mm.
There are a lot of moving pieces, but sometimes we ask family members not to come. I identified one time an aunt was too dramatic, even in her screening. And I was like, nope, she can't come. Like, she's going to make it all about her. And we just
Mm.
don't need that. We
Okay.
want it to be a peaceful, loving event. Doesn't always happen, but
Sure.
that's what
Okay.
the aim is.
That makes sense. I guess that's one thing that I hadn't considered, and why I really wanted to ask you about this is there's a lot of planning that goes on before. It's not just like, all right, guys, let's get together in this room and
Right.
write a letter to them, and okay, that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah. Like, if someone calls me and says, hey, can you do an intervention tomorrow? I'm going to be like, I'm not the person for you. Like, I need like preparation time. I need to do a lot of research. Like, if we have to get other professionals involved, a licensed clinician, or my
Mm,
partner's a certified addiction professional. But if it just depends, like, who do we need to get involved? Like, it needs planning time. We want to go in safely. We want to know as much information as we can.
okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I would think that would lead to maybe not necessarily more success always in the terms of that person accepting treatment, but at least it's more likely not to be just a huge blow up or something like that.
Right.
You mentioned, and we discussed like these moments where people were direct with us, or we heard some things we needed to hear. How often have you seen someone come into the intervention and they're super defensive, like from the beginning, or they're saying like, no, I don't have a problem, or maybe they're in denial or whatever, and then at the end of it they're like, man, like this is what I needed to hear, like I do need help? Like does that happen very often, just like
Yeah.
in this 1 hour? How long is it, would an intervention be typically?
I mean, I've had some where someone says yes right away before we
Okay.
can even go around the room. And then I've had ones where it's taken us like hours to really
Wow.
work, having a break off in groups and whatnot, like
Oh
have, 'cause
wow.
we usually work in pairs.
Mm,
So one person stay with the family, one person go with the individual, the identified loved one, or, it's really like we can go in with all these plans too, and we just don't know what's going to happen. But we do
okay.
work with the family prior. Like we try to get them to do a support meeting before. We send them tons of resources to educate themselves. We work with them on understanding and how to speak to their loved one and provide book, like a whole list of resources for them to be able to have support themselves. So the family work before is huge to do.
I
So
can under
they're good before, a little better.
Okay, I can understand that. And how much of that is about just the enabling side of things that might be going on?
Oh, there's so much enabling.
Okay.
So much. It's very hard for parents to not attach like loving with monetary or giving or constantly allowing them to do the same things over. Like they don't, it's hard. And I can understand it as a mom. I totally
Mhm.
can get it. But like when we have to get kind of firm with people sometimes, and they don't always like it. They don't
Yeah,
always want me to say, listen, your family is needs help. Your whole family needs help, not just your person, your son. You need help. You need to go to therapy. And we want you to work with a therapist. We want you to do coaching with us. We want you to get immersed in this while your loved one's in treatment.
that makes a lot of sense. Part of the reason I ask is when I went to treatment, I remember there was like, and I think this is pretty common, there was like a family weekend, right? Or
Mhm.
on the weekends, like there was a family meeting type of thing. And there was this counselor, this guy Chris. It was just really great, and he would always start the meeting off because, of course, the one thing I didn't like is it was like literally every week in the exact same exact same meeting, because sometimes like certain family members couldn't make it or whatever. But he would always start the meeting off by saying like, hey, family members, mom, dad, I'm really glad you're here. You're here because you're part of the problem. And that would really piss some people off, like,
I
what?
love it.
Like, how am I part of the problem?
Right.
And it makes sense. So I mean, I had to tell my parents like right off the bat, like, when I was finally getting honest about everything, I do not need any cash. Like, do not give me cash for any reason
Right.
whatsoever.
Right. Was it your mom especially? Because usually moms with the boys have
Oh
always.
yeah, I was, yeah. Like me and my mom are super tight, and I was hitting her up for 3 to 4 oil changes a month, and flat tires and all that stuff. And she would always help me out. And I'm not a parent yet, but I do get it. It's like you don't want to see your kid in pain, and
Right.
it's so easy to be in denial about things, and I can only imagine because I was in such denial about what was going on with me. So of course, like, my parents would be in denial about it.
Right. They are. And when a parent tells me something like, oh, well, if my daughter goes to rehab for 30 days, I'm going to buy her a new car and do this and this. I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, hold on, slow
Yeah,
down.
I literally saw that happen. There was a girl in rehab who got like a brand new Mustang as
Oh,
soon as
yeah.
she
This
got
is
out.
a very like, let's motivate her with a car. And it's like, oh, no, no, let her earn a car. Or what do I do if my daughter, has all this credit debt? I'm like, she's 35 years old. Let her like handle it herself. Like they want to fix everything.
Hmm.
That's just what they're used to. So the families need a lot of work too,
Yeah,
you
yeah, that
know?
makes a lot of sense. Now, you're also a recovery coach, right?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people out there these days that either claim to be recovery coaches or they are really recovery coaches. But there's a lot of people, or a lot more people, which I think is a good thing for the most part, a
Yeah.
lot more people in the space, right? What would you say really sets you apart from maybe what other people are doing, or like what do you really focus on as a recovery coach?
Well, so with my interventions and with my coaching, like I did a number of trainings, and I learned under people and did like supervision for interventions. I did for like 2 years of supervisions and second sharing and all that stuff.
Oh wow, okay.
um, and did a lot of clinical supervision. And then for my coaching, I have the She Recovers designation coach training. I have a life coach training certification and another recovery coach certification. So I just constantly am immersing myself in learning, and growing in that area. Um, I think that I do best with women that are moms, that are getting sober. That's like my passion because of probably because of what I've gone through. But
Right.
understanding that dynamic, that how hard it is to learn who you are at the same time as you're trying to raise children is really hard. And I think that the reason for the rise of the coaching in this recovery, I mean, life coaching has been big forever, but in the recovery space is like sponsor for 12-step fellowships is super important if you have trauma and you need a therapist. But like what about like who's going to check on you, who's going to hold you accountable? So it's like I reach out to my clients, hold them accountable. I see them in person, I do Zooms with them, I text with them, I FaceTime with them. I'm very, very involved. I help them come up with goals, um, whatever they want to work towards in life. And I also like get release assigned for their therapist so we can communicate. Like if they're working on trauma and therapy, I know I need to support them after that therapy session. I need to be there for them. So I'm kind of like the in between, for either people that don't need to go to treatment, I haven't gotten to that point, or have completed treatment and need that, that extra piece.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I think you identified a couple things, but and I certainly, although I didn't have a recovery coach early on in sobriety, like I did do therapy, and and I'm a 12-step guy, so I had a sponsor. I certainly, and I'm a coach myself, a nutrition and fitness coach, so I see like the benefit in coaching. I think you brought up an interesting question though, like for someone that is maybe has a sponsor and they're in whatever stage of recovery. Maybe they're new or they've been around a little while, and they're kind of wondering like, why would I really need a recovery coach? Like what, on top of my sponsor, like, and I think, again, I think you already identified a few things, but what would you maybe throw out to that person to have them think about, the benefits of this a little bit?
Well, there's a few different things. So, one, a recovery coach is definitely not for everybody. So, some people don't need it or don't want it. So that's one piece. Another one is if you're like, I've been working with a number of people that are like in their recovery for a while and just feel kind of stagnant and like
Yeah.
struggle with going after goals or struggle with, really taking things to the next, my company's name, the next level, but really taking things to the next level. And that I've been able to do that pretty effortlessly. I mean, I've worked very hard, but it comes very natural to me. So I love to help empower others just for some, it's really about working with them and helping them walk the journey and walking it with them, but just empowering people. So if people have struggled to stay sober and have tried a lot of things, that's when it's a good thing. When people have the extra resource, and why not set them up with the best support from the get-go, that's when it's good. Because a sponsor's job is to take you through the 12 steps. A coach's job is to help you how to like organize your life and figure things out and navigate your day. So I have some clients I speak to all day, literally.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And I think it's probably a lot of it is about just developing a plan, right? Like how do I fit all these different things, including my recovery? Like how do I make this all work together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and then
Okay.
the whole element of being a parent,
Mm.
it's very hard for moms to try to find, especially, well, especially working moms or stay-at-home moms, trying to figure all that out. Well, like I had a woman recently who discharged from like a long-term program, and she had to come home. She had been away for a while. She had two kids to come home to, a husband, parent, like just so many moving pieces, and like trying to adjust back to being home after being in residential care. It's a lot. Like she needed a little extra support.
Yeah.
Um, and
That
then
makes
we
sense.
get creative. We get creative for whatever somebody needs. Sometimes
Okay.
taking them out to go do something fun and let's show them that you can have fun in recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's which is so important. Now, I want to ask you for because I'm sure you've worked with a lot of people that are new to recovery. Could you identify maybe one or two of, I'm just going to call them mistakes. I mean, we all make mistakes. We all trip up a little bit, whether, and hopefully we learn from them. So I think a lot of the times, like I truly believe nothing, happens by mistake,
Right.
including the mistakes themselves. They're
Yeah.
there for a reason, hopefully to learn from, like I said. Could you identify maybe one or two of the mistakes that you see people making when trying to get sober early on in recovery?
The first one that comes to mind is too much too fast.
Mm,
We like did all this stuff we did all this time and we want it all to be better right away. So like
yeah.
I remember the slogan of may you have a slow and painful recovery,
Wow,
and I
I haven't heard that one. I like that.
well, it's true. Like I used to look at people when I was new and see people getting like, material stuff quick. And I like was struggling and I struggled for a really long time, but thank God I did because I appreciate what I have today. Like I worked
Mm,
hard. I was always handed everything when I was a young girl. And so now I've had to work for things as an adult and I appreciate and value them. So don't go for too much too fast. Like give yourself time. The other thing is a big recovery topic, which is relationships. I had left my son's father right when I got home from treatment, and I needed to figure out who I was. And I was not about a guy. I had always been living with a boyfriend or
okay.
whatever my whole life.
Yeah.
Got married to my son's father, and when we split up, I took like 4 years of like me time. I casually dated a little, but nothing serious and for 4 years. So I think really taking that time because you deserve to get to know yourself and to fall in love with yourself and find out who you are and what you enjoy doing. Like I had a house when I was newly sober that had like a little fireplace. So I'd like light the fire and I'd have incense going and like I
Gotcha.
would just do these fun things by myself, that I never did, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. No, that's so this is a topic that comes up on the show pretty frequently. And in a recent episode, we actually had on a guy named Joaquin who started the Castle app, Clean and Sober Love. So it's a dating app for people in sobriety. Yeah. And yeah, they have apps for everything,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. I've heard of them, and they just are after my time.
And I didn't go. I feel pretty grateful, like I didn't have to do the dating app thing because it does seem pretty crazy. But that was one of the things that we talked about. It's been talked about a few different times, and I see like again, part of the reason I like doing the show is because like it has opened my mind up to some different thinking. I think that I lean more towards what you're saying, like with the relationships early on. Although I was in a long term relationship and I'm married to her now,
Mm,
I had no idea who the hell I was when I got sober.
right.
And so I don't know who I am. She didn't know who I was, especially not when like I'm doing things like starting to like meditate and say, she's like, who the hell is this guy? Right.
What
And
happened to
yeah,
you?
yeah, like, what did they do to him there, in these 30 days? So I think I get that. Like we really need to spend some time with ourselves, and we're not going to figure it out overnight, right? But it's like, what do I want, and who do I want to be, because
Yeah.
now I have some choices. I don't have to. You talked about identifying as the pretty girl, right? Younger or earlier on, like you were identified as that, and you held on, you kind of claimed that. And it's like I don't have to be that person that I identified as for so long, and I have some choices. Who do I want to be now? And I think we need to take the time to look into that. But on the flip side, I've also had some people point out to me that maybe it's different for some people, and maybe maybe they're a little more mature socially. And so I don't know. I kind of I see both sides of it. I think I lean more towards what you're saying
It definitely is different for everyone. I know I have friends that got married right when they were new people or whatever in
though.
recovery
Oh
and they're
wow.
still together today. But like
Yeah.
I had never in my entire life ever been alone. And
Okay.
so for me to figure out and learn who I was, and thank God I did it because now I
Hmm.
have a daughter and I'm remarried. I have a daughter, a little girl who's like my attachment. Like I had that half a week when my son went to his dad's to like be completely alone, like take myself out to dinner. Like I'm so grateful for those 4 years of that time, before I got remarried and all that stuff and had another child. It was the best gift I could have ever given myself.
Yeah, that's really cool. And as you just said, being alone, I think that was one of the biggest things I learned too, is it like how to be okay with being just with me, because for so long I was one of those people that always had to have like the TV on in the background or something just to like, because I really couldn't stand being alone with myself. Like I didn't want to hear what was going on in my
Right.
head, you know?
Right. And that's a huge part of I believe recovery. So I also kind of believe in the way that if you don't do it now, like in the beginning, it's gonna come out in another way and you're gonna have to work on it later in another way. I really believe that.
Hmm.
Just like with other things that have surfaced in recovery, like, at 9 years, all of a sudden I had body issues, never had it in my whole life. Like, okay, I had to do work on that. As I'm approaching my late 30s, I'm going to be 40 next. So like there's just new things that come up. And I think that sometimes if we push things to the side and don't deal with them, they come up in another way. And then we have to deal with them anyways.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I get what you're saying. Like, although it's not easy early on, like address as much as possible in the beginning. And I think I understand that, if anything, just from the perspective of, if there are some things that I should be doing early on in my recovery, I think a lot of the times it's not very likely that we're ever going to address them or ever start doing them. Right. It's like, if someone does decide that a 12-step program is good for them, it's like, if you don't get a sponsor within the first few months or whatever it is, like, is it really likely that you're going to do
Right.
this?
Right.
You know?
Right. Exactly. Like, this is my alone time. You see this? This is it. I don't get any alone time anymore. I have a house full of people. I love it, but like I cherish that first 4 years,
Yeah.
and then I'm fine if I travel alone, if I have to travel I'm totally good alone. I love
Hmm.
it.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
get a
pretty
lot of it
cool.
anymore.
I asked you about never alone, never alone. I asked you about some of the things that people might struggle with early on in recovery, and your company being called Next Level, which I love. I've seen a lot of people, and definitely some guys that I know in recovery that have some time, and it's like something hasn't clicked. Like, a lot of the times I think it shows up in terms of like, I don't want to say just financially, but maybe what they're doing like for their careers or kind of with their lives, or maybe it's they haven't taken care of their health. It's like all these different things that pop up.
Mhm.
Like, what do you see? And I know this is a really broad question, but what do you see as being maybe one of the biggest barriers? It's like holding people back that have been sober for a while and they can't get to that next level. Like, what are some of the things that you end up addressing with these people to like really help them take their recovery to that next level, even though they've been sober for a little while?
Yeah. I don't know if it's always identifiable, but sometimes I think people think it's just about stopping, using drugs and alcohol, and they're good with that. Like, if
Hmm.
they're not getting wasted or getting high, they're fine. For me, it was like when I knew all the things that I had, like, destroyed all these great opportunities, I had to know that there was something ahead for me, like in my sobriety. And I set kind of outlandish goals for myself, but I think that people settle. I think that, there's something with being grateful for where you are and being grateful for what you have. Like, I believe in keeping your feet in the day and being grateful, but there is nothing wrong with going after and reaching for the stars and believing that you're capable of anything. And I think we suffer from low self-esteem as collectively, as people in early recovery,
Sure.
or people in recovery. We don't think that we're worth it. We don't know that there's more out there for us. Like, sometimes I identify with people, like, they were looking for a job, and I'm like, well, if you're applying for all these jobs that you don't have any interest in, why don't you try to create something, like, and give yourself a little freedom, do a few side jobs financially, and then you can go towards your goal. Like, people don't often think like that. So I think that I think people limit themselves, and You know, I am a huge 12-step person too, but there's also been a lot of additions on top of that for me, like
Yeah.
health piece. Like I've been working out and eating healthy since I mean, not all the time, but most of the time since I got sober, and so I think that a lot of people miss that, like the health. Like you got to go to doctor's appointments. You have to, it's great to exercise, even if you go for walks, whatever it is. I damaged my body so much. I want to treat it well now. So I just think there's some things that people don't think of just besides what's like right in front of them, but there's like all of this out there too, you
Mm,
know?
yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. And see, I think that's kind of where I'm at. It's like 12 steps plus try some different stuff out. I never heard anyone in a 12-step meeting talking about self-limiting beliefs, you know, or why, or goal setting, maybe once or twice, but not too much, and not really how to do it. I think that's great that, that's a big part of what you work on with your clients in the recovery coaching, because I think what a lot of the times, like what I failed to see initially about why goal setting is important, like, well, I think number one, people think it's like this super simple. Oh, well, I'm just going to set a goal and that's it. But it's really important to do certain things, like get specific and maybe even put some timetable to it. And but I think what I failed to see, and maybe other people can kind of relate to, is that it's like, how am I going to get someplace that I haven't even established what that looks like yet? It's like the analogy I use is it's like, and I talk to my clients about this too a little bit. It's like, that's basically like getting in the car and then just like driving and you have no destination.
Right.
It's like, how are you going to get there?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably, and the low self-esteem and all that stuff makes a lot of sense to me. But I think I'm with you in that I needed to know that there was something bigger or better, definitely better than it was when I was, getting high and just totally destroying my life.
Right. And like we all have to get humble, early in recovery and take like a job that might not be like our dream job and whatnot. But I needed to know that there was a future ahead of that, that that was a stepping stone for me. And I had a best friend, with my best friend from eighth grade who actually passed away from an overdose in 2015. And then in her honor, I started a nonprofit, which is not operating anymore, but it was for a number of years, that sent women in recovery to college.
Oh,
Because
wow.
if a woman comes into recovery and she's lost everything, if she knows that she can go get a college education, it's going to empower her to do something with her life.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. And I think just one of the coolest things that was ever shared with me, and I try to share this with as many people as possible, is somewhere along the way someone shared with me essentially what you said, that there really is no limit to how good life can get in recovery. And that has been my experience completely.
truth. People used to tell me, "Oh, you're going to fall off that pink cloud." And I'm here to tell them that, like, most days, I'm still on that damn pink cloud
Wow.
13 years later. I mean, I go through stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had my great moments through the COVID time and my, like, what the hell, I need to go see a new therapist. Like,
Hmm.
those, I mean, I've had my ups and downs, but I've lately, because I've walked through the adversities, I've walked through the pain, you know, the solutions I know that work, upping my meetings, going to therapy, doing things that make me feel good. I feel like I could pinch myself every day now. Like, is this real? Like, life is so good.
That's
And
cool.
we're like on like life is not. I mean, it's crazy out there, but like
Yeah.
right here, it's good.
Hmm. I really love that you said that, because people, look, and you probably know way more about it than I do, but like when you stop using drugs and alcohol for a period of time, you're naturally going to feel better. And there's some physiological stuff going on there too, right? Your chemistry is almost trying to balance itself out, and you may even feel some kind of euphoria. And then you throw in like recovery stuff and meeting new people and new thoughts and ideas, and maybe even the idea of some good things happening in your life, and like you do feel great, and people say like, oh, it's a pink cloud, it'll go away, like almost like, don't worry, you'll feel like shit, in a couple
Like,
of.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm with you, like I don't think that, not like every day just feels like super incredible, but or that life doesn't happen, because it does. But I I am one of those people that believes, like, I don't think that feeling has to go away. Like, I think maybe that's really just like grace. to some degree.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. And I think that that is kind of like what I think a lot of people aren't reaching for in their recovery process, or don't even know it's available to them, you know?
yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, as I mentioned, you're also the co-host of the Overcoming Adversity podcast. Tell us a little about the show. Who's it for? What do you guys talk about?
So my business partner of Next Level Recovery Associates and I, Blake Cohen, we started it over, I guess, a year and a half ago. And we wanted to highlight people that have been through something. Some people are in addiction and mental illness related, but others are health issues. Like one woman was diagnosed with Parkinson's at 27 or something like that.
Well,
Another man lost a limb, someone who lost a child. So we want to hear about like their adversity, and then like how they got through it, and how they what they do now positively to, in the healing process, because most people, when they go through something like that, it shakes their life and they have to heal, and then they end up doing good things for others. So that's pretty much our topics.
wow, that's cool. And so I'm sure you hear a lot of how people grow through that adversity.
Yeah, it's inspiring, and it really opened my eyes too, because we wanted to have some addiction stories, but we wanted to encompass other, that like a lot of us in recovery kind of forget that there's so many people in the world that go through so
Hmm.
many things, that they feel the same way we do, that maybe
Sure.
didn't use substances, but it's just people are remarkable and resilient for what they go through, and how they try to change the world positively with their healing process. It just is very inspiring.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's something that I think about more and more is like, I mean, there are people that are not in recovery that also have incredible stories. Yeah, have been through some just like awful things that you would think like there is no way that this person is going to survive this, much less create something good from this.
Right, right.
And they do. So that's pretty awesome. I think
Yeah.
you just mentioned a few things, Amanda, but can you tell us a little bit about what your recovery looks like today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now it's definitely sharpened up since I've had to stay still, because
Hmm.
one of my ways to get outside of myself without even knowing it is to stay busy. And that definitely showed me during this time that, like, oh, Amanda, you didn't feel for a while because you stayed so busy. So it was like boom. But attending meetings. I believe in, I have a sponsor. I attend actually various 12-step fellowships, and I'm like cool with it now. I did all, one fellowship for 9 years. I did another one only for 2 years. And then now I'm just totally good with going what feels good.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then I pray, meditate. I have my little trusty journal, because I usually come up here because it's my office. I have my little journal and my readings. So there you go.
You got the journal.
So I write right now, and I've been doing it for months, is like writing goals, gratitude, and body love, because
Mm,
I started to be too hardcore with some of the ways I was working out, and I was acting like I was hating my body rather than loving it. So I'm trying to make sure I show my body love every day right now. So I speak to other people in recovery regularly. Fitness is a great form of meditation for me. I also do regular meditation. Um, Being present in my life and in my family, taking downtime, because I literally was going for so many years that, like, it was go, 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 go. And I think that's one thing that this has helped us all with, is to be present and feel grounded.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and just it shifts and changes. I go to retreats. I kind of have women over for meetings. I go to therapy when I need it. I try different kinds of meetings. I just keep trying, and just put myself out there, and I'm open to new things that could be, beneficial and help me grow.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Just staying open minded. So important no matter how long we've been sober, how good life gets. I think that's a really great point.
Yeah,
So before we wrap up, I'm going to put you on the spot here,
sure.
and I'm going to ask you if there's maybe one piece of advice that you'd like to share with the sober nation.
Well, I want people to know that they're capable of anything, and that we're our own worst critics often, and we stand in our own way a lot. So
Mm,
if there's something that's like deep down in there, that's a dream of yours, that you think that you're not good enough for, or you can't do it, maybe someone else can. I'm here to tell you that like you can do anything that you put your mind to. You can do anything you put your heart to, and nothing is out of reach, you know. And believe in yourself, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, many people come and go, but it's us and our spirituality, and you know, and then in this time our household, that is what's there. So put the efforts there.
I love that. Yep. You can do it. You can
You can
do it.
do it.
Absolutely. So you can catch an episode of the Overcoming Adversity podcast on Apple Music and Spotify. You can also learn more about Amanda's recovery coaching at nextlevelrecoveryassociates.com. Thanks again for coming on the show, Amanda.
Thanks so much for having me. This was awesome.
Be sure to check out the show notes for all the info from today's episode. Sober Nation FM is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Sobriety Engine is a free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. This show is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle while supporting your sobriety, you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And again, whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Nation, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.